Hi guys, this is Sarah at LaBoo, and today I want to talk about using your piping foot to install piping in a border, for a binding, wherever it is that you would like to install it. There are basically two ways to do this. You can do two pieces of fabric at the same time, which is how I'm going to start, or you can do a single layer at a time. So I'm not going to pin the whole thing in place, but I do like to put a pin in to start. It's just going to hold my layers together. And what I have here is two pieces. So if this were going to be my border, I would have my two border pieces here. And then you can kind of see what this is going to look like when I open that up. So I'll have this cute little binding piece in there. I have used my piping hot binding tool to trim up my piping here so that it is 1/4 of an inch. And I'm using my favorite foot, which is the piping foot left. So I like this one because I have more of my fabric underneath my foot when I do this, and the opening for my piping is right here. So what I need to do is I need to get the opening of the foot, which is here, lined up with the piping that's on my foot here, on my fabric. So I'm going to put my foot down here, and I'm not in line up, so I'm going to just get that lined up. And you can use your fingers to kind of get the position. All right, so I can see that everything is lined up where I want it to be, right? I'm just double checking. Yep, I've got everything lined up. Now, I'm not going to keep this pin in. I'm actually going to take the pin out. And I'm going to turn my hand wheel just so that my needle goes in the fabric. Now, the position that it's in right now is the last position that I sewed in. And I actually want to move my needle position a little bit closer to the left. All right, because I don't want to be able to see any of the previous stitching line. So if you're doing this for the first time, you may find the process of sewing two pieces together at the same time a little daunting because you can't see what you're doing. And if that's the case, that's okay. Some people like to sew them separate, and I'm going to show that as well. But I'm just going to go slow, and I'm just keeping that piping in line. And I'm just making sure that I'm keeping my fabric pieces all lined up here. I'll zoom in a little so you can see a little bit better. The nice thing is the groove in the foot, it kind of creates that channel, and it just kind of goes right where it's supposed to be. So I don't really have to do too much. Okay, we'll zoom out a little here. And you can see I've got the dainty little piping right in my seam. So I could use this for my border. I could put this around a project that I wanted to turn. So if I had something that I was going to basically sew around all four corners and turn, and there wasn't really going to be any particular binding, I could put that there, or I could have this between two little border pieces. All right, so I sewed both pieces in at the same time, Here's what it looks like underneath. All right. And then if I found that to be too difficult, I can always sew a single layer on at a time. So with this, you can really see how the piping foot is going to line up. And so the piping is in the track, and I'm using the edge of the fabric here. I've got my needle nice and tight to the piping. And you can see how it's stitching just a little bit to the left of the existing stitching, so I don't see any of that. And there you can see the 2 rows of stitching and the tiny little piece of piping right in there. So that really is how easy it is to install piping. Once you have it done, you're just going to put it in the area that you want to go, and you're going to stitch. Now, if I needed to worry about turning a corner, what I would do in that instance is I wouldn't stitch all the way to the edge of the fabric if I wanted to turn it. The advantage of using bias binding strips is that you have stretch. So when you're pulling on that, it'll go around a curve, but you can actually just turn a corner with your piece. You can just turn your corner. So you can just turn it this way. You can clip into your corner. So I can clip into that. Oh, I have the world's dullest scissors here. There we go. I can clip into that piece. So if I need to turn on an outside angle, that's going to turn a lot nicer. So I'm coming up to my corner here. And that needs to be about 1/4 of an inch away, and then I would turn and pull that. And then after I'm done and I've got that stitched down, I'm going to want to clip into that corner a little bit more so that it sits a little bit flatter. All right, so you can do it that way. You can go on inside corners, so you can pleat the fabric this way, right? So the other thing that you can do is, this is really tiny piping, so we could just go in this direction, and then I could lay my next piece of piping here and then just stitch down across there. I would have a little bit of an intersection underneath, but then this is the 2mm piping, so it wouldn't be too thick in that particular area, so you can certainly do that. You could also pull out the cording in those little corners, so you could go up to your 1/4 inch and actually clip the piping in there and then stitch that closed so that you wouldn't have any piping in the corner. So lots of easy ways to turn your corners. If you're nervous about turning a direct corner, you can always make the corners and the edges circular so that you have less of a direct angle to turn into. So I hope that's helpful. This is how you can use any of the piping feet to install piping. So all I have on here is the piping left, but you could also use the mini piping foot or the cording, the purl and piping foot. Any of those would work exactly the same way. Thanks for watching.